Say it with me, for we walk by faith, not by sight.
Hey, dog. Spend time doing that. Like there's, maybe people watch, what? What do you want from me? What do you want from me? Are you going to climb up on me? You going to put white fur all over my shirt? Is that what you're going to do? Huh? Need to go potty? Let's go potty. Okay, you had to process it. We'll be back. Hey guys, John with Cheap Old Cars and Corners. Today we're going to talk about New Edge shocks, okay? Not getting into coilovers. I don't have much experience with coilovers, but I don't really know if I want to go down the coilover route, mainly because I want to have a bunch of information on cheap entry-level stuff that helps people out more than being able to help people with more expensive coilovers, because I would never buy cheap coilovers. I would only buy good ones. Okay, so you might first before we get into it, you might think, hey, who's this guy? Why should I listen to him? What's he got to say that he knows something that other people don't know? I'm going to put up on the screen my new Edges, the current ones I have 4 right now, and then I've had 2 others in the past that have moved on. 3 others. I've had 3 others in the past. I've had 7 new Edges total, okay? I hate talking about it. I have an MBA, okay? I like research. I love research. I love learning things. I love expanding my knowledge, I feel like I'm into a new hobby all the time. It's like, it's always cars is the main thing, but I love learning about things, right? We're going to talk about shocks. And the thing with the research and the MBA and all that, whatever, people don't research. And I have trouble understanding that point of view, but I see so many times people don't do any of their own research. They just either do something and hope for the best, or ask in a Facebook group, or back in the day on the forums, right? They ask a question and they get an answer and they go for it. And they're like, okay, cool. I ask some people that are more knowledgeable than me. Here's the problem with shocks. Here's this big problem that I have and the reason for this video. Okay. When you ask somebody online, hey, I'm going to do these drop springs. How's the ride? This and that. People go, it's pretty stiff, Okay. So they put the springs on the car and they have now essentially no suspension. They're riding on their bump stops, but they don't know they're riding on their bump stops. Now, you get 2 types of people beyond that, right? Because I said there's 2 types of people. There's the ones that just do, and then there's ones that ask a question. The ones that ask a question are more likely to ask a second question. Sometimes they don't. They kind of split off. The ones that ask the next question after they put the drop springs on, the question is always, hey, I put these drop springs on, and my car rides really bouncy. What can I do to fix that, or is that just how it is? Okay, bouncy, I like a trampoline, like a jump around blow up house thing, or like what are we talking about bouncy? Because that's what I think. When you say a car ride's bouncy, I think of those 70s land barges that are like, when their shocks get wore out after about 5,000 miles, or just, that's bouncy to me. Maybe some people would say that's floaty, but that's what I think of as bouncy. What these people are talking about is they are personally bouncing out of their seat because their car has no suspension. So everything that happens that the suspension to soak up is right up to them, and they're bouncing around in the seat, compressing their spines and doing all kinds of fun stuff like that, okay? Tearing up their cars. It's not good on cars to do that. So, because they're designed to resist the forces of what gets through the springs and the shocks. They're not designed to not have springs or shocks. You just have steel rods, basically. So once I figured out what the heck people were talking about, bouncy, okay, well, their car ride's really stiff. And I didn't really understand that until I rode in a Mach 1 that was for sale. Actually, I was driving it. I ended up buying a Cobra bumper from the guy. Super nice guy. But he was like, yeah, I put the drop springs on it and it's really bouncy. And I said, can I give you a little bit of advice? Because I was like 20 years older than him, right? Or ish, 15, 20, something like that. I said, can I give you a little bit of advice? He's like, sure. I said, your rear shocks are bottomed out. I said, my Blue Bullet is as low as this car, and it doesn't ride like this. And I told him what he could do, and he's like, oh, really? Okay. He ended up selling the car to a kid in Oklahoma who ended up wrecking it and whatever. Unfortunate, because it was a really nice white Mach 1. I digress. What people don't understand is these cars don't have much travel, okay? And I need you guys to understand this. And I'm going to kind of work my way through it here. These new Edges, they don't have much travel, especially in the rear. There's a big pinion snubber, which is the front of the center section of the axle, and there's a, because it can kind of want to twist up when you're accelerating, and so there's a bump stop up there that it kind of bumps into if it twists up that high to keep it from going too far too fast or something crazy happening and banging off the bottom of the car. Okay, so there's a pinions number. You lower a car, you should put on a shorter pinions number. When you're working on a new edge, if you've worked on new edge Mustangs, okay, there's something you'll probably notice. There's no bump stops, okay? There are the 2 pinions numbers and no bump stops. It's because on the new edge Mustangs, and when I say new edge, I'm talking about SN95 as well, okay? 94 to 04. So this is a big chunk of years of the Mustangs. The bump stops are built into the shocks. I cannot tell you if factory, I'm going to back up just a sec here. Fox bodies, it's basically the same chassis, right? That light bulb is going out and it's going to kill me. Anyway, I got to replace that. I might replace it in the middle of this video. Fox bodies have external bump stops, I think. I don't know. I've never worked on a Fox body outside of some engine work and some interior stuff. I've never worked under a Fox body, okay? So I can't say, oh, they do have bump stops. I don't know for sure. What I do know is the main difference in aftermarket shocks and struts. So when I say this, I can't speak for the factory ones because the factory Fox body ones might have actually been a shorter shock. Most of the aftermarket shocks and struts that I've dealt with for Mustangs, the only difference between the Fox body and the SN95/New Edge is that it had the newer one has a built-in bump stop. Outside of that, they're the same shock though, okay? Same valving and same travel of the rod, piston, whatever. It goes the same amount, but the later ones have a built-in bump stop, so that limits how much it can compress, okay? I'm going to show you on the struts what that built-in bump stop often looks like. It's this rubber guy right here, okay? And so if I have this strut, and this is a Tikiko, whatever, I'm pretty sure, I don't know for sure, because the car was 20-something years old when I bought it, but I'm pretty sure this was the factory strut that was on my Blue Bullet. Well, I know it came off the Blue Bullet, right? But I think this was the factory strut. So if I wanted some more travel in the front on this, I mean, you could take it off and you could have more travel. Now on the rear shocks, they have that sleeve that comes down over them, right? And these would have a sleeve too, but that on the sleeve that comes down over, sometimes you can take those off and sometimes you can't. Okay, so if you have a new Edge Mustang and you're putting some drop shocks on the rear, and I'll talk about how far in just a second. But if you do that and you can take the top off, and let's say there's a bump stop under there, yank that bump stop out, okay? Now, be mindful that without a bump stop, if you do still compress the suspension all the way, it's going to hit hard, okay? But you have further to go before you compress it all the way. And typically drop springs are stiffer springs, so it's harder to compress them all the way and get to the bump stop. And a lot of them, too, are like progressive, so that the more they compress, progressive, so the more they compress, the stiffer they get. And so it can be difficult to bottom one out, but it's still possible. And something you need to understand about why it's a problem to bottom out your shocks, especially rear shocks. When you bottom out a shock, let's say you're almost bottomed out anyway, and you're compressing in a corner. You're going through a left corner. You're compressing over to the right. That shock's riding on its bump stop. Or like you take the bump stop out and you're still too long, whatever, and you just have no shock left. It's bottomed. The shock is bottomed out. Okay, that becomes a steel rod that is stiffer than your spring. Okay, and so what happens is your spring rate essentially goes to infinity. You no longer have a rear spring rate because the spring can't do anything anymore. The shock is compressed and stopped, and any more compression on the car is just jamming things up. What that does when you have a rear spring rate that's infinity, and if you have a rear spring rate that's way higher than your front spring rate, or a rear sway bar that's way stiffer than factory, or in comparison to the front and the springs and stuff way stiffer than it should be, oversteer. You get oversteer. Okay. Now, that can be what people call snap oversteer. You can set up a car so wrong that when you first turn in, the rear comes around on you. But typically, people don't set cars up like that. But if you go real low and you're bottoming your shock out and you hit a bump, you could cause that to happen. And I know The Drive put out a video where they were talking about, independent rear suspension versus solid axle. That is in the case of the suspension having enough play and doing what it should. If you bottom out your shocks, your rear is going to step out on you in a mid-corner bump if you have enough, sideways, lateral G, whatever. It can lead to a really bad thing, okay? So we don't want this. We already have this stigma of Mustangs running into stuff all over the place. Let's not set our cars up to where they get looping around, okay? Now, again, I said I don't know much about the factory shocks because I'm dealing with 20-year-old cars here. I work with this stuff a lot. But how much compression can you get? How much lower can your car be than factory before you run into an issue with the factory shocks, right? Because, springs are $300, $350. Some of them are $250, whatever. But that's a chunk of money. And then you're like, oh, well, okay, let's get some shocks too. Well, okay, shocks are $400 or $500 because it's struts in the front. Those are more expensive. Okay. How far can you go? I can't speak for every shock. I can speak for the factory bullet shocks because I have a set and I tested this out. And I can speak for the Coney STRT, I think, the orange street shocks. And that's a very popular shock to get because Coney is, a performance brand. And I say performance, like the orange entry-level one's not really a performance shock. It's kind of a factory shock. Before I talk about that, I just want to say also, if you have at least 500-pound springs in the front and anything over 200 pounds in the rear on these cars, you really should be stepping up to a Bilstein or the Coney yellow. The Coney orange, are you going to climb up on me? Oh, geez. Okay, come here. The Coney orange doesn't really have enough. The compression dampening is not bad, but the rebound dampening, when the spring's trying to push you back up, how much it controls that up is at least some to be desired. Okay? Hi, you going to give me kisses? Okay. She's lonely. Good girl. You want your snout rubbed? All right, okay. You're getting white fur all over my black shirt. Here's a goober. All right, scooch. Oh, go on, scooch. I'm filming stuff, doggy. Go see. She's silly. Anyway, there's nobody there. She just, when I tell her go see, she thinks somebody's at the front door, so she barks and runs and goes and looks. I have to say, like, a bullet sits 3/4 of an inch lower than a GT. But I'm going to say, when I'm talking about my drop distances or like how much drop, I'm going to tell you from the point of view of a GT, because most of these out here are V6s and GTs. There's not many bullets, not many Mach 1s, not many Cobras. And Cobras have the independent rear anyway, so that's a whole different thing. I'm going to tell you drop amounts from a GT because that's how the springs are advertised, right? On my bullet with the factory rear shocks, I had the car up in the air, sitting on the tire, so weighted and everything, but up in the air where I could get under it. I unbolted the bottom of the shock and I pushed it up to see how far it would go before it stopped going. Okay. Now, mind you, the car's 20 years old. At the time I did this, it was about 20. And the isolators get, a little bit wore out. Although the bottom isolator is plastic, the top one is rubber. And springs can sag a little bit over time. Now, I don't know how much the springs have sagged. I did know that I had a stock V6 and my stock bullet sitting side by side, and the bullet was still 3/4 of an inch lower than the V6, as it should have been. So I don't know if they both sagged a little bit over time, or maybe the springs haven't sagged any. Even the isolators did definitely compress some, but it was as it was supposed to be. Hey, doggy. So when I took that factory shock and I pushed it up, it moved up about a 1/2 inch. Okay, now the bullet's 3/4 of an inch lower, so that's 1.25 inches from a GT. 1.25 inches down from a GT, and the factory bullet rear shock was bottomed out. That's a problem. That's a big problem, because most drop springs are 1 inch to 1.5 inches in the rear. And so you might say, oh, well, you had 1.25 inches and it's 1 inch, you're fine. But your suspension still has to compress when you go over bumps, right? So if you've only got a 1/2 inch of compression, you're going to do that hitting any little bump. You're going to be bottoming out your shock every bump you get. Okay? That's not good. So I put on the Coney orange shocks, did the same thing, a little over a 1/2 inch. Okay? This is the new edge version of the shock. Little over a 1/2 inch, about 6/10 of an inch of travel. So then I put on Fox body Coney rear shocks, and I haven't done this with the Bilsteins or the Coney yellows. I imagine the Coney yellows are probably the same. Bilsteins, it's probably the same. I don't know for sure. I need to get some and try it out. But on the factory rear springs with factory isolators, I had with the new edge. With the Fox body rear shocks, the Coney orange Fox body rear shocks on a bullet, I still had 1.6 inches of travel. So the taking out the bump stop, the built-in bump stop in the shock to go to that Fox body shock, it gained me an inch of compression. Now I was running pretty stiff springs, and so I thought, okay, cool, maybe that's good enough. I will say I'm a big guy, obviously. Felt it just kiss on some big bumps, really big bumps. Like driving down the interstate and there's like a dip, like the whole car does. Like, I have felt the rear just kiss the bump stop, okay, with the Fox body rear. And with me, I'm a bigger guy, wife and son in the car, so a lot of weight in the car. I have felt it just kiss. Now, never by myself has it done that, okay? Now, I have fixed that. For my car personally, I have the Maximum Motorsports rear lower control arms, the adjustable ones, and I wanted the car to have a touch of rake because most of the springs set them like flat. And I'm like, oh, it's a V8 car. I grew up, with muscle car stuff. So, and, not the big rake, not like with the big tires or anything on the back like that. But, my rear tires are wider and I have just 1/4 inch of rake. Just a little bit. You can see it, but it looks good. Okay. But doing that, I haven't touched the bump stops anymore. So that takes care of the rear. You're going to lower these cars, get Fox body rear shocks, and understand that with a few people in the car and stuff, you can still bottom them out. Front struts. Okay. The front struts aren't typically as big of a problem in terms of bottoming out at 1.5 inch lower than a GT. Get down 2 inches, you're going to be bottoming out. But you also have these kind of big soft bump stops. And so maybe you don't notice it that much because the springs are stiff and everything too. But what you will run into is your shock is too compressed at all times. You want your ride height to be about, of the piston inside the shock, to be about middle of the travel, go up and down. Now maybe not, maybe it needs to be able to compress more because it takes bumps and whatever. So whatever, maybe it needs to be down near the bottom so it has more room to compress. I don't know exactly how they're set up. I need to look into that. That's something I need to learn. I want to research. I've always liked suspensions and stocks. I actually wanted to design suspensions when I was a kid. The front is not as big of a deal, but you will wear out new edge shocks quicker. So either take your bump stop out, if you can compare. I'm going to add one more thing. Sorry. On the Coney Orange shocks, I had a new edge one and a Fox body one side by side out of the car. They were extended the same length, and it just went down more. The Fox body one went compressed more because it didn't have that same built-in internal bump stop. Okay. Front struts. A lot of times you can pull that off. I don't know for a fact that a Fox front strut is shorter. My assumption, this is an assumption, I don't know, is that they just don't have the bump stop like this one does, and they're the same length because it's basically the same car. It makes sense to me. However, I do run on my Blue Bullet the Maximum Motorsports caster camber plates. You have to drill a hole for those. I wasn't too thrilled about that. Not as bad as I thought it was going to be. The Maximum Motorsports caster camber plates actually move the mounting point of the strut up. I tried to find this before making this video, and I found it before, but I couldn't find it now. But it's like a 1/4 or a 1/2 inch, something like that. It moves the mounting point of the strut up just a little bit. And so even though let's say you're lowering your car 2 inches, you're gaining a little bit of it back with those caster camber plates, camber caster, whatever, CC plates, whatever people call them. You're gaining a little bit of that back with the Maximum Motorsports plates. And so it makes it not as bad. However, if you're lowering one of these Mustangs, and I'm going to say, if you're lowering it any more than a 1/2 inch, get the Fox body ones. I'll say this too. My Green Bullet is still on its factory springs. It's 3/4 of an inch lower than a GT, and it has Coney Orange new edge shocks and struts, okay, all the way around. With me, my wife, my son, and one of his friends in the car, we were bottoming out on a few bumps yesterday. We took the car up the roadways, and it bottomed out a couple times on there, and just the rear, not the front, just the rear. And so that, to me, that's a compromise and a problem. So I'm looking at my wife and I'm like, dang it, we need to change that out. That needs to get fixed. And so I'm looking at this going, what can I do? Because I bought these shocks, I've had that car 6 years. I bought them right when I got the car, but I've only put 3,000 miles on that Green Bullet since I bought it in 6 years. And so I'm like, those shocks are in good shape. I don't want to just buy another set. I'm like, oh yeah, my Mach 1. The Mach 1 has some cheapy shocks and struts on it. And so I need to replace those anyway. So now I'm like, okay, cool. I've got these new edge length ones that'll go on the Mach 1. Now the Mach 1 only sits half an inch lower than a GT. So instead of having, the little bit of travel that it has left, it'll have an extra half inch. Something like that'll be perfect for the Mach 1, having that new edge shock on the back. We're not going to lower that car anymore. So what I did on the Mach 1 is I put bullet springs on the front, which dropped it a 1/4 inch. And then I took out top and bottom isolators, which got me 3/8. And so if you want to figure that up, so a 1/4 is the same as 2/8 plus 3/8, 5/8 of an inch drop in the front on the Mach 1, and the rear is stock. I think I took out one isolator because it was sitting a little crooked, so I leveled it just a bit with an isolator. I can't remember for sure now. I know I did that on the red car too. But basically the rear is stock and a half inch lower than a GT, and the front is, well, what would that be? That would be 5/8 plus a half inch, so 4/8. And so that's 9/8 in the front. So an inch and an eighth lower than a GT in the front and a half inch lower than a GT in the rear. So it's not super low, okay? And, I'll put a picture on the screen and everything. But I get compliments on that car all the time. People they're like, man, that looks really good. It looks like it's lowered, but it looks like not slammed. And I get compliments all the time on that car, which is really surprising because it's not really that much different. But it's that thing, it just, sometimes a little small difference can make a huge difference to the look of the car. And doing it how I did it, it gave it that little bit of rake. So all of my cars, all 4 of them, actually have the same amount of rake now. I've really worked to make that happen, which is pretty cool because they all have they don't all sit the same height, but they all have a similar stance. That's kind of my thing that I do to the cars, which I like that. That's kind of fun. Anyway, let me get back to the thing here. Do your research on these things. Spend the money to get good parts. If you can't afford good parts, don't get BC Racing. Or not BC is sometimes okay. Sorry. Don't get Max speeding rods, coilovers. Those are cheap garbage. They are. Don't do it. Look, I get that you just want to be low and say you have coilovers. Let me be real honest with you. The people you're trying to impress with the parts that you're buying, if you're like, this is to the young guys out there, the people you're trying to impress don't really care about you, right? And you just gloating and showing off anyway. To other young people, maybe having the parts in this and that makes a big deal. To an older guy, if you want to impress the other, you shouldn't care what other people think in the first place. But if you want to gain a little credit or a little respect or something amongst a group of car guys, just have a nice, clean car. You don't need to worry about, if you show up with a nice, clean car and talk about their cars. Don't focus on what you're going to do to your car. You could say, I just recently bought it. I'm working on getting it nice and clean, getting a few mechanical things sorted out. I do want to lower it in time and get some different wheels, but I'm saving up for that. Look, there are very few people on this planet who are always well-to-do with money to do whatever they want to do, right? Very few people have that. Most people that have some amount of money didn't at one point. And so if you're honest and just say, hey, I want to lower it a little bit and I want to put some wheels on it, but right now I'm just making it clean and nice until I can afford good stuff, people will respect that. If they don't, then they're probably a D-bag that you shouldn't hang out with anyway. So who cares? I'm not a respect all builds person. If you threw a bunch of cheap crap at your car to try to get credit, you're going to get made fun of. Right? Because you threw a bunch of cheap crap at your car that you're going to have to replace anyway. I understand. I was young once too, and I just I would paint an intake tube because it looks cool. It looks like I'm into cars. It was stupid. Just clean it, make it nice, mechanically sound, mod as you can afford, not as you can, mod as you can afford nice parts. Right? Okay. That's what you need to do. I want to get the Bilstein shocks for my car, for my Blue Bullet, the Bilstein shocks and struts. Can't afford them right now. I mean, I could, but I don't want to spend the money on it because money is allocated for different things here and there, and I don't want to use this for this and whatever, right? So I'm not going to do it right now. I'm saving up for them. I want a C5 vet. Freaking C5 vets with 100,000 miles are like $9 or $10 grand. Okay, $9,000 or $10,000 to a lot of people is just like, okay, I'll just go pull from the bank and whatever, right? Well, quite frankly, my wife doesn't work, and I haven't been working for a few months. I need to find another job. Either YouTube needs to take off or I need to find another job. One of these things is going to happen, probably if I have to find a job. Anyway, because YouTube is not helping with car content right now. Oh my gosh, YouTube is not helping with car content. Everybody seems to be hurting in the car worlds. I'm getting off topic here. This is getting out of hand. Buy the right parts. Do your research. Please do your research. And don't just trust what some people say online, because I'm telling you, I've read so many forum posts and Facebook, not marketplace, but Facebook page posts. 90% of what you read is wrong. Wrong, wrong, horribly wrong. I just hope that you trust what I'm saying here, because goodness, I hate that so many of these cars are riding around with no real suspension to speak of. And people are trying to get into the car hobby, and they're young and they're trying to learn, and they're like hurting their backs on an 1.5-inch drop, which they shouldn't be, right? They shouldn't, like, it shouldn't ride horrible, but it rides absolutely horrible. And they're like, is this, they think that's what you're supposed to have. And so then they go get some cheap coilovers, and they're riding around on fully compressed and not even doing anything either. And they're like, yeah, I got good sporty performance. And then the car slides out and hits a tree. We got to do better, guys. I hate the do better stuff. I really hate that crap. We got to learn and understand things. There's no reason you should take one of these Mustangs and put Ford Motorsports springs on it, because Ford Motorsports sells springs for these cars still. There's no reason you should put these springs on a car and be hitting bump stops and having a horrible, crappy ride. But that happens. If you notice, the Ford rear springs they're not that low because of this type of stuff, right? The Ford Motorsport springs should say switch to Fox body rear shocks. They really should. People would be better. But if you look at them, it's like one is like a 1/2 inch and one's like 3/4 inch or an inch or something. You're not getting that low with those springs. There's a black GT running around here, young kid. When I'm out in my cars, because my cars are, I don't mean to be offensive or anything. My cars are way, way nicer than his car. His car is a little bit rough around the edges. But I always wave at him and stuff like, hey, nice Mustang, whatever. But I've seen him hit a bump, and he's like in the car. And I'm like, goodness, don't do it. If you got to replace your shocks anyway, just get Fox body ones. Even if you're stock height, get Fox body ones. They have more compression. Anyway, thank you for watching. This will be a fun Saturday video. I'm working on a set in my garage where I can have a nicer stuff behind me, other than, I think you can see some of my computer desk. There's a door right over here, and there's a blue wall behind me. I'm working on it because I need a place where I can sit down and talk, and the background is visually interesting. I said, this just bluish gray wall. I hate this color. I'm going to repaint this room soon. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. Maybe my ramblings are hilarious. I don't know. See you in the next one. Thanks for watching.